All right, everyone, welcome back. So today we're diving into something I think you're going to find really fascinating. We're talking spy skills.
Spy skills, huh? Sounds
It
intriguing.
is, right? And what's really cool is we're not just talking about, how to disappear into a crowd or anything like that. We're talking about using these skills in everyday life,
Mm.
to read people better, to be more
You
persuasive.
can get what you want.
Exactly. And the best part is we've got a former CIA officer, Andrew Bustamante. You shared this interview with us, right?
Yeah, I did. It's packed with insights. What really struck me was how applicable his experiences are to, well, everyone. He breaks down some pretty complex psychology into strategies anyone can use.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. You never know where they're going to go. So let's jump right in. One of the things that grabbed my attention was Bustamante saying the CIA specifically looks for people who are good liars.
Right. It seems counterintuitive at first, but when you think about the CIA's mission, operating undercover, gathering intel,
You need people who can blend in.
exactly, build trust without raising suspicion.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. He says the best liars actually talk less, not more.
It's true. It's not about spinning this whole elaborate story. It's about asking the right questions, guiding the conversation without revealing your hand.
And he talked about this idea of establishing a baseline.
Right. Like everyone has a typical way they act, right? So you need to figure out what's normal for someone to spot those little deviations that might mean they're lying.
Which he actually did with the interviewer off camera.
No way. He noticed a difference in their behavior.
Yeah. But he also said we shouldn't just focus on those little tells, like eye movements or whatever.
Yeah, those can be misleading. It's all about context.
Like trying to understand a word without hearing the whole sentence.
Exactly. You need
Yeah.
the full picture. Okay, but switching gears for a sec, Bustamante also talked about these 4 core motivations that drive people: reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. He calls it RICE.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about rice.
So if you can figure out what truly motivates someone, whether it's money, a cause they believe in, or just wanting to be recognized, you can tailor your approach.
And he actually ranked them in order of power, which I found fascinating.
Oh, yeah. And the most powerful one, it's ideology. People who are driven by their beliefs, their values, they're the most committed.
Makes sense. So how do you figure out what makes someone tick?
Well, Bustamante said he used to pay close attention to what people would volunteer in conversation. Those little details they share without prompting, that's often the key.
It's like they're revealing their hand without realizing it.
Precisely. Those seemingly insignificant details can tell you a lot about someone's values, their aspirations, everything.
That is so interesting. So next time you're trying to get someone on board with an idea or just understand them better, think about RIDE. So we've talked about reading people, understanding what motivates them, but what about our own thinking? How do we make sure we're seeing things clearly, especially in those high pressure situations?
Yeah, Bustamante had some really interesting things to say about that. He's all about the difference between, get this, perception versus perspective.
Okay, explain that. What's the distinction there?
So perception is that gut feeling, right? It's your initial interpretation of a situation, but it can be colored by emotions, by your own biases,
And perspective.
Perspective is more objective. It's about stepping back, gathering information, looking at things from different angles before you jump to conclusions.
So it's like we can get so caught up in the heat of the moment, we miss the bigger picture.
Exactly. And Bustamante says the CIA, they actually train for that. They call it stress inoculation.
Stress inoculation. What is that? Like giving someone a shot of stress?
Well, not exactly, but kind of. It's about intentionally putting yourself in tough situations, pushing your limits, but in a controlled environment.
So you're basically building up a tolerance.
Yeah, like mental muscle. You
Right.
get used to operating under pressure, making clear decisions, even when things are chaotic. And he argued, why run from fear when you can leverage it?
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
He said he almost encourages fear in those who won't take action.
Wow. Why is that?
Because it gives those who do act an edge. The people who can push past that fear, they're the ones who are going to make things happen. All right, ready for another acronym?
Get me.
SAGE-RAT. It stands for spot, assess, develop, recruit, handle, and terminate.
Okay, that sounds intense.
It is. He used it to manage assets in the field, but get this, he says you can apply it to any area of life. Business, relationships, anything where you're trying to build connections. Think of it like this.
Like everyone's a potential asset.
In a way, yeah. But here's the kicker. You don't want just any asset, right? You want the right asset. Both Bustamante and the interviewer, They emphasized how important it is to focus on the right relationships. It's about quality over quantity.
So how do you know if someone's the right asset, whether it's for your business or just your life in general?
That's where the assess part of SageRack comes in. You have to ask yourself, do their values align with mine? Can they help me achieve my goals? And can I trust them?
Because trust is huge, especially when you're talking about potentially high-stakes situations.
Absolutely. Bustamante actually used a funny analogy for this.
Whoa, what was it?
He said, it's like that saying, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. It made him laugh because it's so true, you know? You have to be willing to put yourself out there to meet new people, explore new opportunities, but you also have to be discerning. Not everyone's going to be a good fit.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from deception to motivation to building the right relationships. But I think there's one more crucial element we need to talk about, and that's fear.
Yeah, it's kind of the elephant in the room, isn't it?
It is. Because even with all the skills and knowledge in the world, fear can still paralyze us, hold us back from going after what we really want.
And you'd think someone like Bustamante, someone who thrived in such a high-pressure environment, would be all about conquering fear, right?
Exactly. But he actually had a really unexpected perspective on it.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So he's not saying you should try to eliminate fear completely. He actually sees it as a potential source of energy.
Energy, how so?
He argues that fear highlights what matters to us most. The things we're afraid to do, the risks we're hesitant to take, they often point towards areas where we could experience the most growth, the most fulfillment.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So it's not about pretending we're not afraid. It's about changing how we relate to that fear.
Exactly. And for Bustamante, it all comes down to action. He says the key isn't to eliminate fear, but to act in spite of it.
Because action is its own antidote, right? It's like that old saying, the only way out is through.
Exactly. And he gave this example from his time in the CIA. Imagine an undercover officer, right? They're in a foreign country, constantly facing unknowns, potential threats.
Yeah, talk about a high-stress situation.
And the CIA can't eliminate those risks entirely. The world is just inherently unpredictable. But what they can do is train those officers to manage their fear, to make clear-headed decisions even when the pressure is on.
It's about controlling what you can control, right?
Oh.
Your actions, your preparation.
Exactly. And this is where that shift in mindset comes in. Instead of dwelling on, what if it goes wrong, you start asking yourself, what if it goes right?
I love that. So it's about embracing the uncertainty, the fear even, and turning it into a source of motivation.
Exactly. And Bustamante believes this ability, the ability to act even when we're afraid, is more valuable than ever in today's world.
Makes sense. I mean, things are changing so fast, you can't rely on the old playbooks anymore.
Exactly. The only constant is change itself. And in that kind of environment, the people who can adapt, who can tolerate discomfort, who can make those tough decisions even when they're afraid, those are the ones who are going to thrive.
It's about becoming the heroes of our own stories.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into spy skills for everyday life, I think the biggest takeaway for me is this. These aren't just tactics, they're ways of thinking, ways of being in the world.
It's about observation, adaptability, building trust, and most importantly, having the courage to take action. Those are the skills that can empower all of us to navigate whatever life throws our way.
And with that, we'll leave you with this. The world is full of possibilities, but you have to be bold enough to seize them. Thanks for diving deep with us.